Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I am once again joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 42nd episode this week, where we'll be recapping last Monday's game versus the Chicago Bears, previewing this upcoming Sunday's game versus the New York Jets, and discussing news around the NFL. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our website at pats300levelpod.com. So, Kevin, pretty disappointing weekend in sports, especially for me. Padres lost Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and got eliminated from the NLCS. And then Monday was the killer of the Patriots getting absolutely killed by the Chicago Bears, losing 33-14. In a game that we were not expecting anything close to that. We might have been both expecting a blowout, but for the other team. What was just your overall thoughts on that frustrating game?
I could definitely say, like we had said, it's not something either of us expected, and really anyone expected. Everyone really thought this was going to be a blow, or at least a pretty safe win. The Bears aren't really a good football team, and they haven't played that well this year. Their offense hasn't really done much, and we didn't think this was going to be like that. So, definitely a kind of a shocking loss. One thing to give a little caveat, where the Patriots usually have one of these losses every year, where it comes out of left field, something you're not expected. Every team has one too, so it's not like it's just the Patriots. Every team has a loss that you're not expecting. So one that that's why it's stupid to do one of those schedule checks and say win, loss, because you can't predict it. You can have a general idea of a record.
Yeah.
But to go individually at the game level, it's just there's too many unknowns. There's too much parity in the league anyway. So again, it's not completely. I think it's more of a blip and kind of an outlier than what I think you would see for the rest of the season, because I think the team isn't this bad. And there's a few things that we are going to discuss today that are a little concerning with the team in the offense, but I don't think it's something where this is how the team is.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like you said, like every team has that random loss. Last year, the Bills, for instance, this just comes to the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
They lost to the worst place Jaguars 9-6 in a game that you never expect. Another, just for instance, for the Patriots, usually they might lose a close game to a bad team where you're not expecting it, but occasionally they'll have a blowout. One that just comes to mind is in 2010, I believe, versus the Cleveland Browns, where they got blown out, I believe, like 34-14 or something like that. So it's not that usual we see a blowout to a bad team, but it has happened in the past.
Yep.
But for me, I think this was just one of the most frustrating games I've watched as a Patriots fan, not just because of the outcome, but you're facing a team that isn't that good, but also very one-dimensional. They can't really throw the ball. They're known as running. And part of the reason why they have success running is because of Field. So if you shut him down, then you pretty much shut their running game down too. And then on defense, they came into the league as the third worst against the run. And that's your strength. And you just weren't able to establish the run. So on both sides of the ball, you kind of had a game plan and you just weren't able to execute. So I think that for me, it was a frustrating part. And the thing is, it was close at halftime. They were down 3, I believe. And then they're only down late in the third quarter. So they had a chance. And it's not like it was a blowout from the beginning. They had a chance. I think for me, that was just the most frustrating part, is just everything that went down. The whole quarterback situation, which we'll get into in a minute. Defense, once again, seeing a mobile quarterback, just not able to stop them, which has been a killer. Pretty much that's been their kryptonite the last decade plus, facing mobile quarterbacks, especially the last couple of years that we've seen. So that's something they'll have to correct if they want to have success going forward.
Yep. Yeah, and then kind of going into the quarterback situation first, I think it's something everyone's interested in. Everyone, every podcast, every sports show, anyone's writing an article. This is the first thing they're talking about, like the quarterback controversy, what was going on in the game. And I do actually kind of take Bill at his word, where what his plan was And I think part of this was actually overlooking the Bears a little bit. And Bill never admit about overlooking an opponent, but I think his general idea was with this game, you're facing the Jets next week. The Jets are actually kind of doing pretty well this year. You don't want to let Mac have his first start against them if he hasn't had his feet wet. You don't know how his ankle's going to respond in a in-game moment. So get his feet wet, put Zappy in for a little bit, and then maybe put Mac back in, see how his ankle holds up after a little bit, and then go from there. And I think what kind of happened was some stuff that Bill wasn't really expecting. Number one, Zappy led the 2 touchdown drives. I don't think anything that he did was anything spectacular, especially there's that Myers catch, which I could have thrown the ball to Myers then. He was that wide open.
It was an incredible catch by Myers, but an awful throw by Zappy.
So it wasn't anything great that Zappy did. So, but having him score 2 touchdowns in a row, how can you take him out right after then? So I think his plan kind of got away from what he was actually thinking. So I could see the value of what he thought, but again, it all completely fell on his face there. And then the other thing though too, being at the game, something I'm very upset with and kind of embarrassed as a Patriots fan is Patriots fans are better than this. These aren't supposed to be the Red Sox pink hat fans where they don't know what's going on. They're clueless and they're just trying to follow through with everything. Zappy's not the future right now. Mac Jones had one of the best statistical seasons for a rookie last year, and you're just throwing him out there like he's a piece of garbage. And it's not like Mac has sucked that bad. He's been put in a bad position to succeed this year, and he's given this team everything. And for everyone to be chanting for Zappy and hoping for him, what do you expect is going to happen? How many times are going to hit lightning in the bottle where you're going to be getting a mid to low round pick and then going to be the next Tom Brady? Odds are it's not going to happen, especially from what we saw with Bailey this game and even the previous games. He had 4 passes that were deflected. He really kind of lost it at the end of the game where he kind of lost control of everything and did not look like he was playing that well. And who knows, maybe he might be good at the end of the day, but there's nothing that has shown you specifically other than just the box score of how many points the team has gotten. And like we had gone over the last two podcasts or 3 podcasts, you can't just look at the score. You have to look at how he played and how everything was. And sure, he was doing better and better each week, but they weren't asking him to do much.
That's what I was just going to say is you have to look at what the plays that he was given and what they were asking him to do.
Yeah.
And it was just completely different.
There's one thing we don't usually link out to any articles, but maybe we might put it in the show description. But Kyrie Thompson's article on WEI, which I would usually never try and to promote WEI, but I actually kind of really like Kyrie. So
me too.
He had a good breakdown, just showing what the difference was, what they're asking between the 2 quarterbacks, between Mac versus Bailey. And one of the big things that was a big kind of stat was just the amount of extra protection that they bring in for Zappy versus Mac. That's a huge difference. Number one, there's less pressure that you're going to have to deal with. Number 2, there's less reads that you actually have to make. So you're really constricted to 2, maybe 3 reads that you have to make versus Mac. They're asking a lot more. If you're going to make 4 or 5 progressions, and maybe that's why Zappy looks quicker on his progressions, but he's not being asked to do the same thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about maybe even longer, but I'm going to let you get some words in because I've been going on for a few minutes here. So that way I don't steal the whole show.
No, so I think I understand what you're saying. And I do take Bill at his word that was the plan. I don't know if it was necessarily after 3 series he was going to switch, but I think the interception was just another awful decision for Mac, which this is the thing I don't get is last year he didn't have those throws, which if he was a rookie, you'd understand him having those occasional what the hell was that plays. And he really didn't have those last year, but he's had 5, 6 this year already in 4 games. I know it. I think it just seems like he's pressing where he feels the pressure or he just feels uncomfortable and he's trying more than he should. But I think Bill's plan was to play both of them. But the thing that just I don't understand about that is just dating back to 2001, where when Drew Bledsoe was healthy, leading up to the Rams game. He split reps equally between Brady and Bledsoe to see how they did in the game. And then during the game, they lost to the Rams. And after that game, he said, Tom Brady is our starter. And he admitted that splitting reps that week wasn't the best idea because you're not giving the person who's going to be playing enough reps. And yet he kind of did the same exact thing 21 years later. So if he never had that, that's one thing. But since he had this, it's not the exact same scenario where it seems Max, they already said Max going to be a starter, but I understand splitting reps during the week if you're not sure Max going to be healthy enough to play, but I don't understand splitting the reps and then splitting the reps in the game too. That just doesn't make sense unless you have like a running quarterback where you want to have a couple like run plays or something like that. If they're both the same type of quarterback, it doesn't make sense to split reps during the game. And it doesn't really make sense to get your feet wet either. I don't understand that at least, but
I'd say this is the one defense for there and devil advocate is maybe Bill doesn't have as much where Mac has been pressing lately that he wants to play. Maybe Bill doesn't believe in his ankle health as much as Mac is saying, because Mac is going to do anything he can to get out there, and every player is going to do that. So maybe that's just Bill trying to protect Mac from himself there. And there was even a play that I think it was Giardi had tweeted out. And we can go back and look later, but there was a rollout to Mac's left, where he was hindered by his ankle because he tried to roll out and then he just stopped and slowed down. So it's still bothering him a little bit. It's not something that he's not 100%, but he's not probably less than 80%.
Yeah.
But I think maybe this was where Bill didn't have complete faith that his ankles was good enough to do what they needed him to do. And maybe that's also the reason why it's different than the Bledsoe situation where this is a quarterback's feet. It's not like a rib. So it's more with the mechanics, more with how he kind of moves around, and he's been having to run a lot this year, and we saw it even in this game. So it's a lot different, I think, than that Bledsoe situation. So I don't think they're kind of apples to apples. They're a little bit different in that.
I agree. It's a different scenario, but it's still the same thing of splitting reps to see who's going to be playing and whatnot. I know that he said that, or not publicly, but internally, Max the quarterback, but still it's the same thing where you're not getting as much reps as you need to.
All right.
And then I think just one other thing with Bailey is he did have a couple deep throws, but most of his throws were just screens to Stevenson too, which they're not asking, like we said the past 3 episodes, they're not asking him to do much. And I think with Mac, you'll see that as long as he doesn't make those stupid mistakes, if he just goes back to what he was last year, you'll see that Mac can do a lot more than what Bailey can do, at least at this present moment. Who knows how they develop and whatnot, but
And I think just the other thing with this is, I don't know if you have it later on in the notes, but just the coaching staff, but just they need to dial back the game plans for Mac. They need to go back to what was working well with him. Play action and having the runs off play action, run the ball, be under center. And there's way too much that was shotgun, way too much that's predictable with Mac. And they're just doing disservice to Mac. And I get Matt's not, it's only his the 7th game that he's being an offensive coordinator, and it takes a little bit of time. And again, for the Tom Currans out there, what else would you have wanted out there? They're not getting Bill O'Brien. So if they had the Nick Caley as the offensive coordinator, he'd be going through the same growing pains as well. It's not like he's going to be 100%. And even with McDaniels when he came in the first time, it's not like every single time he was perfect. So one last thing, and then we need to move on. But just regarding the under center, I think that's something that they have to go back to, because a quarterback being under center, it allows the offense to do a little more, unless the offensive line just isn't holding up, but also it helps the run game too. But one thing Matt Chatham actually said before the game was he was wondering how much Mac was going to be under center versus in the shotgun, because under center, having to drop back, especially in play action, that puts more stress on the ankle. So he was thinking they might put him more in shotgun. So that's just one thing, at least in this game, but we've also seen throughout the season, Mac was in shotgun a lot more than Bailey. Okay. Yeah, that's a fair point.
I think just switching on to, we talked a lot about quarterback, but I think quarterback wasn't the main talking point, at least what should be the main talking point from this game. which it really was the horrendous display from a defense that has actually performed very well this year, except for the Baltimore game.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. This had a lot of feel to kind of those Bills games at the end of the year last year, where they could not stop them when they wanted to. At
Bills
the beginning
game,
of the
and then
game,
also Baltimore earlier too.
yep. At the beginning, they had some stops. Again, it was a pretty close game for the first half, but after the first half, they just really got away from, and it was just a dreadful display. And the one thing that I don't get, I get why they started out with zone with Fields, where he's a mobile quarterback. If you're playing zone, then you keep your eyes on the quarterback the whole time in case he starts to run. The problem though with that is he kept beating the zones when they were out there. And then the other problem is that if you're expecting him not to be good enough, why not play man to man, have a spy, and then have that one person responsible for Fields? And that way your best trait right now is your man-to-man matchup. So that would have been the best scenario, especially when they started getting beat. So I could say starting off, and then they didn't make any adjustments is the big thing. Where that would be the adjustment you would want to make. You would want to add a spy. They added a spy at the end, but it was way too late. And they needed to switch to man-to-man. The zone was not working with Fields. He just kept beating the zone the entire time. And then they had no spy, and the linebacker core isn't good enough right now. And we'll get into that later on, but just that's showing up as a big hole where it's something we had thought at the beginning might not be a problem, and we were completely wrong. So
no, I agree. The linebacker group has just been awful. And if you look at the snap counts, other than Juwan Bentley and then Tavai was on the field 60+% of the snaps, but McMillan and Mac Wilson were on the field, I believe, less than 10% of snaps. But that's something with this, at least since Steve Belichick and Mayo took over on defense, where there's been a lot of boomer bust on defense. You've seen a lot more shutouts or holding opponents under 10 points with a very good game plan, but you've also seen a lot more blowouts too, where they're not able to make those adjustments, where you see something happening and then they just either they don't make adjustments or they don't have the players in position to be able to execute the game plan. And I wonder how much of it is on Steve, how much of it is just the player personnel group that they have. I think a key thing that a lot of people didn't talk about after this game was the injury that happened to Kyle Duggar, the ankle injury that happened early in the game, which took him out, which he was also missed. And he was inactive for the Baltimore game because of another injury, where he's one of your top 3 defenders, especially at tackling and covering space, making up space. And I feel when they played Baltimore in 2020, where they shut down Lamar Jackson, a big reason was because of Kyle Duggar. And I wonder if he was able to play the whole game, if the Baltimore game this year, as well as this game versus the Bears, would have been a completely different story, because I know it's only one player, but his skill set really would suit well versus these mobile type quarterbacks, either playing spy or just being able, if the quarterback does run, depending on where he is on the field, he can make up the ground to tackle him before he gets a huge gain.
Yeah, because he's basically like a faster linebacker and a little bit smaller, but basically their linebackers are almost the same size.
Similar size, actually.
Yeah. So Duggar is your best linebacker, even though he's a safety. So losing him hurts a lot. So that was a big part in this game too. But it also didn't have a few great plays. He whiffed on a tackle in the beginning of the game. But yeah, I think they definitely hurt missing Duggar there.
Yep. So Fields throwing the ball wasn't great. He was 13 of 21, 179 yards, but a lot of those completions came on 3rd and long, or him scrambling on 3rd and long. And the defense allowed 11 conversions on 3rd down and 18 attempts. Of those 18 attempts, 2 of them were really in garbage time. And then one was 3rd and long, and they ran the ball to set up a field goal. So it really was 11 of 15, which is absolutely horrendous. I don't think I've ever seen anything that bad. So that's something that they've had some great games in 3rd down and 4th down this year, but even last year and the year before, there's been some games where you need to get a stop. They just can't make that stop and can't get off the field. That was the big thing that killed them last year. And then they've been better this year, but this is a concerning aspect this game, and then also the Baltimore game too.
Yep. Yeah. So kind of going into that, you already mentioned Fields a little bit. The running game, Fields was actually the leading carrier for them, which isn't too surprising, just based on their running backs are decent, but if they kind of tried to stop, there's really only the running attack that you really got to focus on. They didn't win with this,
and their running backs are pretty good, but they're not top 15 running backs. The reason why they have success is Fields is able to run, and because you have to worry about that threat of Fields running, that allows them to make up more and get longer gains. Where Fields had 84 yards, Montgomery had 62, Herbert had 62. They ran for 244 yards on this team. Once again, pathetic. Another bad display of run defense this year, which we saw last year. We saw earlier this year versus Baltimore. We saw last year versus the Colts. Just games where they just can't get off the field. They can't stop the run.
All right. Anything else you'd like to discuss on the defense, or kind of go on to the running attack, O-line, that sort of stuff?
It doesn't really fit into the defense, but one thing I want to just mention before I forget is the Bears coach had a pretty good game plan versus the Patriots. And one thing to keep in mind is he was the Colts defensive coordinator last year, which shut down the Patriots offense. But he was also part of the scheme of how, even though he was on the defensive side of the ball, he's still in the coaches meetings and probably saw how the Colts tried to attack the Patriots. And they even though quarterback, completely different skill set from Justin Fields versus Carson Wentz, still seeing the weakness in the Patriots and how to exploit them. And he just did a really good job on both sides of the ball this game.
Yep. Yeah. And one of the other things too, which I think we forgot to mention, was just the amount of designed runs that they had for Fields, where even McCourty said that caught them off guard, where they look at that Baltimore film and they saw that's what really succeeded for them. And that's what had them added in there. So that's just another thing with the Patriots team, where usually you're used to seeing them, even if they weren't preparing for something like that, usually they would have an answer and they would adjust. And I don't think they really made any adjustments, which is a little concerning.
Yeah. And then just the one thing, your biggest opponent or toughest opponent this year is going to be the Buffalo Bills. And how did the Bills beat you last year? Josh Allen escaping the pocket, scrambling. And because of that, you can't do a full pass rush. And that gives him to find receivers open. And he's gotten good enough that if someone's open, he's going to find them. So that's something they really have to, I know you have to take each opponent. You can't overlook opponents, but that's something that when they face the Bills, they have to completely correct, or else they're going to be in trouble.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. Moving on, Patriots running attack. They didn't really have much at all. Stevenson, 3.5 yards per game on 11 per carry on 11 carries. Harris only 3 carries, 8 yards, coming off of that hamstring injury. And then the offensive line was, I think, pretty horrendous, really, for the most part. Trent Brown leading that with 4 penalties. And this is, I would say, not his worst game, because I think the Dolphins game was even worse. But this was close to that, just based on you can't have those penalties, especially when you're supposed to be one of the best linemen you have. So anything really to add to that, other than just the line wasn't good enough. The running attack
the line wasn't good in both phases, passing and rushing, and they really needed to establish their run attack, especially considering how bad the Bears defense was against the run this year. They came in the third or fourth worst DVOA against the run, and the Patriots weren't able to execute. And even Stevenson, after the game, he seemed shocked, just in disbelief at how they weren't able to get things going. And that led to just bad field position, or just not able to pick up first downs, especially those first two drives. And because of that, they weren't really able to get into gear and get their offense going, because if you're passing on second and third and long, it's going to be tougher.
Yep, 100% agree. And one little last tidbit, wrapping this up before we get to 3 up, 3 down. Something that you and a few other people have noticed is just the Patriots not showing up in primetime lately, where this is something we're used to being a primetime game. This was something you knew the Patriots would win. They would do well at. I know you've started to do some research. You're going to write a
Yeah.
blog on this in a little bit, but what are your what have you seen so far in your initial kind of research on this?
So I initially just got on this topic. I didn't even think of it, but Taylor Kynes on Twitter. If you don't follow him, I highly suggest it. He's a analyst. He covers the Patriots. He breaks down a lot of game plan. He also works for the NFL as well as Next Gen Stats. And he just tweeted out during the game, "When's the last time you've seen a Patriots team actually prepared during prime time?" And I know usually if you're playing on prime time, you're playing a good opponent. But historically, the Patriots, at least in appearance, they usually play well on prime time. Even if they lose, it's a close game.
Mhm.
But we've seen last year versus the Bills, they got blown out during the playoffs. During the Colts, they lost pretty bad last year. They did beat the Bills last year, 14-10 in a primetime game, but it was also bad weather. So how much of that, like it was kind of a crazy
Mhm.
game. But we've seen this throughout. They did have some good games on Thursday Night Football last year. They blew out the Falcons 25-0. But we've seen historically some games they're good, some games they're bad. Let me pull up the Rams, for instance, a few years ago during 2020.
Mhm.
They got absolutely blown out 24-3. They got blown out versus the Ravens in 2019 when Brady was here. In 2020 versus the Bills in primetime, they got absolutely blown
Mhm.
out. And this is just something we're not accustomed to. Not only are you losing on primetime games, you're just not even competitive. And
Mhm.
I don't know what really the motivations and factors are there. If it's the other team is getting too hyped up because it's prime time and you're just not matching that energy, or if it's just really good game plans. It's tough to say, but it's just something that's really shocking.
Yeah, that's
Something we
good.
haven't seen the last or before 2019. We haven't seen those previous 18 years.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and looking forward to seeing that blog go up and having some good
Yeah.
insight there. All right, 3 up, 3 down, real quick, and then we'll get to 5 questions and then preview the Jets. So I think 3 up, 3 down. I ended up getting some more up just to throw them in there, but
Yeah.
again, when you lose like this, not really anyone's gonna be up. So who's your first one?
So my 3 up, I see all your 3 and I understand, but I'm only going with one. I'm only going with Matthew Judon. 2.5 sacks and another tackle for a loss. He was really one of your only players that really showed up this game.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't perfect. There were some times that the offense ran it towards his side, and that's actually something that we've seen. Mike Reese talked about it this week as well in his notes after the game. Is you're seeing a lot of offensive coordinators when he's on the field, when they're trying to run, they're attacking his side. And he has gotten better than he was last year against the run, but it's still not perfect. But that's not really what he was brought in here to do. He was more brought in here to attack the pass. So he was good. He was really your only player that really showed up.
Yeah, I was gonna say Judon would be in there for me. Really good on the passing situations. Again, like you had said, the one caveat I was going to throw, and you already mentioned that he was really bad against the run this game. They were running on him and running effectively on him.
There were also a couple times when he was pass rushing where he broke containment, and that allowed Fields to scramble and get some yards. So he wasn't perfect either, but he did have production at least.
Yeah. So just trying to get some in the ups for this game because there weren't really too many. I'll just throw the next 2 out there. Again, this is just to have some guys, Stevenson and Parker. Stevenson, I think even though he didn't have too many yards, this is probably his best game in the passing game for him. I don't think he's ever had this many completions in a game. With receptions, not completions. And then Parker
he had 8 catches, 59 yards, I believe.
And then Parker just is starting to look a lot more comfortable where he made one of those other 50-50 catches. He had a really nice slant route where he actually ended up running hard after the route. And then he had a nice outcut on the left-hand side of the field where it was a pretty nice throw and catch for that. So again, nothing really overly impressive for any of these 3, but just to throw them out there. 3 down. I think we have the exact same 3. So if you want to just
and in the exact same order, I see. But number 1 is just the coaching staff, all 3 phases. Offense, they just bad game plan. They weren't able to execute. You know that your opponent's weakness is the running attack, and for whatever reason, they weren't able to get the running game going.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're passing, you put Mac in some bad situations. And then they did run a completely different game plan with Mac and Bailey, but I still don't understand the decision to pull Mac. If you're saying it's not for performance, to pull him, and that, especially considering how the crowd was giving into it and everything, that could definitely hurt a quarterback's confidence. As we've seen with other quarterbacks, I think Mac has better mental toughness, so we'll see how that goes. But if you hear a home crowd that was supporting you last year chanting for your backup, especially if you're coming back from injury, that must be tough. So,
yep.
The whole coaching and defense, like we mentioned, was just atrocious.
Mm-hmm. Yep, nothing really to add there. Next one for me and us and you, Jake Bailey. He was awful in this game. He had I think an average net of under 40 yards, right? You have an average here at 40, but I'm pretty sure it was like 34 point something.
That's not net. That's just average. I kind of get the net quick.
Yeah, his net I think was like 32 yards.
I think it might have been less than that.
Could have been less than that. He was horrible in this game, and every time he got up there, after the first two, I didn't have any faith in him. You're paying him a ton of money. I think he's one of the top paid punters in the league now.
He was the top up until I believe the Jaguars. Another punter just got an extension this week to make him the highest paid.
Yeah.
But
so you're paying him for, I think they extended for 4 years, and he's just not. He's again showing what he was last year, and I think he looks even worse than he did last year.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on with him.
The first game or two, he looked better, and preseason he did, but the last 5+ games, he's just looked awful. He's looked worse than he was last year,
and he's looking progressively worse.
Yeah, and one of those punts was when the Patriots were still in the game. I think they were down 9 at that time, and he gave a 33-yard punt line drive. It's not that it was 33 yards with long hang time and no return. Line drive, 33-yard punt that allowed a 27-yard return. So essentially a 6-yard net. Just absolutely horrendous in a key situation.
Yep.
I don't understand what, like, he was on the injury report a couple times last year, so I think I was giving him the benefit of the doubt that maybe it's just injury related, but I'm really starting to get concerned that it might not be. And this, I still think they should bring in some punters this week. If you find one that you feel comfortable with going for 4 weeks, put Bailey on the IR with Foxborough flu and just figure out what the hell is going wrong, because against the next few weeks, it might not matter. I know the Jets have been playing well and whatnot, but as the season gets on, when you're playing good teams, especially as you're getting, if you want to make playoffs and playoff contention, you have to win the field position battle. And right now, he is one of the main reasons why, or not one of the main, but a key reason why you're not winning the field position battle. Yep. You can't have a punter that's this bad.
Yep, 100%. And then the next one, Trent Brown, again, 4 penalties, 2 holds, the false start trip, and for pressure wise, he had 1 hit, 1 pressure, and just was not good enough in this game. And I guess you could also lump in the whole offensive line here in the down two, and I'd be completely fine with that. But yeah, it was not good enough in this game.
Yep. And then some of those penalties were key, where a lot of them were early on, but they either negated another penalty from the other team that would have given either first down or good field position, or it set you back. So they were key penalties in key situations too.
Yep.
So just a bad week for Trent Brown.
Yep. All right. 5 questions. First one: if Tim Tebow was used more like Taysom Hill, would he have had a more as productive career or more? I'll let you go first.
I think it's a really good question. It's tough to say because we haven't really seen him as the tight end. I know that he tried out with the Jets last year after retiring, I believe 8 years earlier or something like that. But skill set wise, I think he might be a little shorter, but body build, speed, his throwing, I think you can at least say he'd be in the conversation, maybe even better. But it's just something that someone brought up Tebow, and it made me start thinking that. And I was like, that's really a question. If I know he just kept saying, I'm a quarterback. He was resistant to the idea of being used as a fullback or a tight end. But if he was more open to that, I really wonder what his career would have been like.
Yeah, I think if anything, at best, it would be Taysom Hill. If not, I think it might be worse because I don't think he throws as good as Taysom. I don't even think Taysom Hill throws that good, but I think Taysom Hill has a better arm or has a better arm. So I would say at best that, if not, maybe a little bit worse. But interesting question. Next question: if Bill was the head coach of the Bucks, what would their record be?
So I originally wrote this down before this past game game versus the Chicago Bears. So, but looking at the Bucks are 3-4 right now, and so are the Patriots. Their losses are they lost by 2 to the Packers, they lost by 10 to the Chiefs, they lost by 2 to the Steelers, they lost by 18 to the Panthers. I'd say they're 6-1. I think they'd still probably lose to the Chiefs. I don't think against Kenny Pickett with Bill at head coach, they would have lost to the Steelers. I don't think they would have lost to the Panthers in any conversation. And Packers losing by 2, I think he would have been able to figure out them. So I think they're 6-1, but you never really know. I know they're really banged up on the O-line and then at wide receiver, but I think his game planning would have made the difference in those games.
Yeah, I would say at least 2 more wins. So I'll say 5-2. Okay. Next question. What grade would you give the Christian McCaffrey trade?
For which team?
For the 49ers.
It's tough to say. So just looking at it holistically for everything, say a D+ with some caveats. If he comes in and is a Christian McCaffrey of old and is completely worth it 100%. But we've seen you don't give up a lot for running backs, especially aging running backs. And he's someone that keeps getting hurt over and over again, which is common for aging running backs. You have no guarantee he's going to be healthy. I understand why they did it because they feel like they're in position where they can compete this year. And by adding a really good skill player, that'll give him a lot. Gave up a lot for him. If this was 3-4 years ago, yes, I understand. But now he's barely been on the field. And when he hasn't been as productive. So it's kind of high risk, high reward. They're in the same division as the Rams, which the Rams tried giving almost the same thing. I don't know how they had enough draft picks to even do that, but I think they're just going all out. And I think they kind of know that they have to win this year because next year they're going back to Trey Lance. And I don't think they feel confident with Trey Lance either. So go big or go home this year.
I'm giving an F. I was tempted to give a D+, but we just know you don't give that much up for a running back. But especially the other thing that Shanahan's offense is supposed to be known for is pretty much like a plug and play with any sort of running back. And you don't need a great running back for it. His scheme is supposed to make the running back. So what are you giving all this up if your scheme is supposed to be that good? And that's kind of like more of a devil advocate for Shanahan. Is your scheme even really that good? But
and then another thing with his scheme, just before I forget, is they do a lot of outside zone runs. And McCaffrey on outside runs in his career, he only averages 3.4 yards per carry. So scheme wise, I don't know if it's the greatest fit, but he is a really good skill player. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
And it might also take a load off of Deebo Samuel as well, too. So give him some rest so he doesn't get broken down.
All right, next question. NFL trade deadlines a week from this past Tuesday. What position group, if any, should the Patriots target? And you could even throw a player if you'd like.
Linebacker.
Yep.
I don't think they're going to get any of the linebackers we're going to say. Historically, they'll go after like a Kyle Van Noy type, where he's low on the totem pole, probably playing in a system that doesn't play to his skills, or something like that, where you're not giving up much for it. So I think they need to go after linebacker, where right now your linebacker core isn't that great. You have a 4 safety group, but as we've seen, Duggar has missed 2.5 games this year. Phillips has gone down a few times. You can't be relying on only using safeties as linebackers. You need to get more production out of that group.
Yep, I completely agree. Safety. If I was wrote a name, I would say. I already forgot his name. Shaq Thompson from the Panthers, who have already said that they're willing to listen to a trade for him, and he's a pretty good linebacker. But odds are there's going to be someone else that overpays for him. And like you said, it's going to be some guy we've never heard of. So,
Yep.
moving on, last one. What NFL team is the most lost at the QB position currently?
Carolina Panthers.
Oh, that's a good one.
They traded for Sam Darnold last year. They traded for Baker, or they drafted Sam. What's his name? They drafted the guy in the third round. They traded to the Patriots, traded up to get the guy from the Patriots, or from pick number 94. They traded for Baker Mayfield, and right now, with all of them active and healthy, they're playing PJ Walker.
Well, the rookie isn't healthy. He's out for the year.
Okay, well, outside of him, I meant Sam and Baker because that's who you traded the most for. Rookie, it's kind of a crapshoot, but
yeah. I would say the Colts, just because they've gone year after year now with trying to get a quarterback. There's a few good answers for this. So you could say the Colts, Panthers are a good one. The Broncos is another good one where they had been lost. They thought they had the answer, and it seemed I don't think Wilson's got anything.
Yeah.
But I would say this is the Colts just because now you're playing a 6th round pick from last year. And you're benching Matt Ryan, who you traded for, and you're paying a ton of money. So,
and the interesting thing with them is their last however many quarterbacks they have all been top 3 picks, with Peyton Manning for years, and then Andrew Luck, and then Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, all top 3 picks. I wonder if maybe they'll go with Jameis Winston, but Jameis Winston was just benched by the Saints. So if they keep going, I don't know if they're going to go with washed up quarterbacks and they'll go with Jimmy G, or if they want to keep going with those top 3 picks, or maybe they'll go with Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold or someone next year. But
I think the Jimmy G is a good comp for the way that they've been trying to go with everything. They're trying to get someone that's past
their prime,
their initial prime.
But that's the thing is they could have gotten Jimmy this offseason, but they decided to go with Matt Ryan instead. I don't know if it's just the asking price for Jimmy was too high, or they thought Ryan was the best option, but they could have gone with Jimmy. They just thought Matt Ryan out of everyone was the best option, better than Baker Mayfield, which Mayfield's bench too, but it's kind of a crapshoot.
Yep. All right. Moving on, we spent enough time on the past game. We're now going to look forward. Hopefully, have some better things to talk about. It's the New York Jets. Jets are coming in here having probably one of the best records they've had for the first half of the season, and God only knows when. 5-2 record. They've beaten. I don't really think anyone that great. So they beat the Browns. They beat the Steelers. They beat the Dolphins when they're on their 3rd quarterback. The Packers, where now we've seen the Packers are not as good as you thought they would be, and then the Broncos, who stink. So it's not any great wins that they've had, but they're winning. So
they're winning the games they need to win. And I think the only one that's impressive for me is the Packers, just because it was in Lambeau and it was a pretty big blowout, 27-10. It's not like they won by 3 or something like that. But they lost to the Ravens, who we've seen is good. They lost to the Bengals, but they barely beat the Browns, barely beat the Steelers, barely beat the Broncos, beat the Dolphins. But as you said, Dolphins were with their 3rd string QB.
So I think the first story I want to get to is just the last game too. Another story of a quarterback drafted the same year of Mac, kind of comparing the two. Zach Wilson, 2nd overall pick versus Mac, 15th overall. Now as we're recording now, it already came out that Mac is projected to be a starter for this coming week. So good to kind of look just to see the 2 different quarterbacks, how they look. What are your thoughts on Zach and how he's doing this year versus last year, and what his difference has been?
So I haven't watched too much of Jets tape this year to really analyze him fully. I know he missed the first 3 weeks coming back from the injury, but when he's played, he hasn't done much. 252 yards with 50% completion percentage versus the Steelers, 1 TD, 0 interceptions. Last 3 games, 0 TD, 0 interception. So he's not turning the ball over, at least throwing, but 210 yards, 110 yards, 120 yards. He hasn't been doing much. They've been relying more on their running attack. And Breece Hall, their rookie, was having a great year. He got hurt last week, tore his ACL. He's out for the year. But I think the one thing with Zach, especially this year, something that was brought up by on Twitter at PFF Sam_Sam, is when he's under pressure, he's been awful this year. He has a PFF grade under pressure of 23, where when he has no pressure, it's 89.6.
Mm-hmm.
Yards per attempt under pressure, 1.7. Yards per attempt, not completions, yards per attempt. Yards per attempt when he's clean is 9. Completion percentage under pressure, 16. Completion percentage when he's clean, 76%. He's had 42 attempts under pressure, 54 yards total, 2 interceptions, and he has negative 54 yards due to sacks. So the key to the Patriots defense going into this game, at least for Zach Wilson, is just get him under pressure. And they've been one of the better teams in the NFL this year at forcing pressure. They haven't, outside of Judon, they haven't been great at capitalizing on that, getting sacks. He's had a couple of good games where he actually sacked the quarterback. But if they want to have success, they need to rush the quarterback blitz. Wilson is fast and mobile. He hasn't run for a lot of yards this year. I think he's only run for like 40 in 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
But I think part of that is just coming back from the knee injury. They want to make sure they don't want him to be running the ball, potentially injuring that knee. But seeing the game plan of how the Ravens beat the Patriots, how the Bears beat the Patriots, they might do some quarterback designed runs, which we haven't seen from them much this year, just because of how those two teams have been able to capitalize versus them. But you want to make sure you're getting pressure. And there have been a lot of plays where if he starts getting pressure, where he looks like a chicken where his head cut off, he runs backwards. He takes his eye off of the downfield. And that's something that I think they'll have to do. But you've seen him just playing. He has the talent, but so far he hasn't put it all together. It's only his second year, but I don't know if he will. So we'll have to see how it turns out. What are your thoughts on him?
No, I think that's really fair. And something I was going to kind of echo on that is that they've dialed back how much they're asking him to do this year versus last year, where last year they were really trying to have him make a lot of plays and really put the offense on him, which is I think a bad idea especially for a rookie. And you saw the differences between how they coached him versus how the Patriots coached Mac, where Mac was really dialed back. They weren't asking him to do too much. And they've kind of reverted now with the Jets, and they're not asking as much of them. And I think they're kind of scared of him a little bit of making those mistakes, like you said. And those mistakes of the interceptions and how he looks under pressure is really what we saw last year when the Patriots played him, where he had, I think, 3 interceptions in the game, and all of that was under pressure. So I think that's something, the key of the game, get pressure on him. And then one of the interesting things, Breece Hall, well, not interesting in a good way for him, but Breece Hall towards ACL. James Robinson, though, traded from the Jaguars to the Jets. And he's a very good running back. As you know, he came back from the Achilles injury, started the year off really well with Jacksonville. Now they've been playing, I can't pronounce the guy's name, Ateni, who's their first round pick. And obviously going to give more yards to him, but Robinson's a bell cow of a running back. And I actually kind of hope this kind of restarts his production. This guy's selfishly, I have him on my fantasy team running the bench right now, though. But they do have Robinson, and the Michael Carter is a pretty decent back too.
Yeah. So I'm actually really big on James Robinson. I have been since his rookie year when I picked him off of waivers after the second or third week of the season, and he was a big reason why I was successful in fantasy. But just watching him, he's a really good running back. He's also pretty good outside the backfield as well, which is something that Breece Hall was doing well for the Jets this year. They don't have many great wide receivers. They did get Garrett Wilson early in the first round, but their running backs, mix of Carter and Breece Hall, have 41 catches for 380 yards out of the backfield this year. And that's something that with Hall going down might hurt them. But by getting James Robinson, he can definitely fill in that role where he can catch out of the backfield. He's also a really good running back. They did trade for him this week, so I don't know how much he will play, how long it'll take him to learn the playbook, or if they only have him play certain plays that are easy. So that's something to keep an eye on. But if he's able to play a lot, if he picks up the playbook quickly, I don't know if there will be a big decline going from Hall to Robinson.
Yep. And then the wide receiver group you kind of already mentioned, Elijah Morris had some issues off the field with them. Didn't play last week. I don't think they've said anything yet about his availability for this current week, but it doesn't sound good just based on everything going out between them. Braxton Berrios, familiar friend there. They're kind of slot wide receiver. Hasn't had too much production this year versus what he normally has. But it should be interesting to see how they defend them. And then offensive line, losing Elijah Vera Tucker, big injury for him because he's one of the top kind of guards out there. So
yeah.
Anything else you'd like to go over with this before we move on to the D?
Not too much. Garrett Wilson has had a really good rookie year. So far he hasn't put up like Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase rookie year numbers, but 28 catches, 314 yards, 2 TDs going for a team that hasn't really. Joe Flacco threw the ball a little bit, but Wilson hasn't done too much. But he's been productive. They do have 2 tight ends. They have Tyler Conklin, who has 26 catches, 230 yards, and they also have. They got CJ Uzma in free agency this year. He was another big addition, but he hasn't been productive. Only 6 catches, 40 yards. So they do have 2 tight ends you might have to worry about a little bit. And if Duggar is out, they might try and attack that, especially depending on who's guarding him, who's guarding them. So that's something to keep an eye on. Rushing attack, try and take out the rushing attack early, force them to throw the ball. And when they throw the ball, watch out for the backs out of the backfield, and then the tight ends, especially if Duggar is out.
Yep. Defense, their pass defense is kind of middle. I guess basically their pass and run defense. It's not one of the top tier statistically ones this year, not one of the bottom ones. So this actually would be a pretty good test because the Patriots haven't faced the last game, the Bears actually defense is pretty good. But the previous couple games before then, the Lions and then the Browns, it was a pretty bad defense. So it'll be interesting just to see how the Patriots fare this way. Again, different quarterback than Zappy, but any thoughts on what they could particularly attack here, or is it really just a balanced game?
It's kind of a balanced game. And they're middle of the road. They're 11th on run defense and yards per game allowed. And that's going up against the Ravens and the Browns, which both had really good running attacks. They do have Sauce Gardner at cornerback, who is defensive player of the week this week for the AFC. And he's had a really strong rookie campaign so far. So it's going to be interesting. They have some players on defense. It depends if you pass the ball. The Jets, even though they are middle of the road, they're 13th best in pass yards allowed at 210 yards per game. They are 3rd in interceptions. So they do make some plays. They do force some turnovers, and the Patriots have the 2nd most turnovers in the NFL this year. So you're going to have to protect the ball, not throw random passes that are the what the hell moments. Try and be more of that game manager, especially if Mac plays. You want him to be more the Mac we saw the first half of last season, where he takes what the defense is giving. He doesn't try and force it to some players, which part of it I think is his own doing, but part of it is also the play designs that the Matt Patricia is calling, where they're more forcing it downfield, where at least at first, especially how he's played the last few weeks, just get his feet running, get his feet wet, do more of those easy plays. And then as the game gets on, that's when you can start forcing it. Because you don't want to turn it over. And the Jets are a team that has forced those turnovers.
Yep. I agree completely. I think the other big part of this game is special teams. We've talked about Jake Bailey's struggles, Braxton Berrios, a great returner. And again, if I was Jake Bailey, do not punt the ball in bounds, especially by how bad your punt average has been. Just punt the ball out of bounds. And
the one thing I'm worried with that, though, is if he tries punting it out of bounds, he might get like a 10-yard punt that yanks it out.
Yeah, that is a good thing to worry about. But I don't know. I
don't think it's good to worry about, but it's something I am worrying about.
Yeah. So that's just another thing to keep an eye on, see how they kind of take care of it. And then again, if he has, it doesn't look like they're bringing any punters, like we said, but if he has another bad week, they got to do something about him. But yeah. All right. Prediction time. Patriots are favored in this game.
I'm actually surprised about that.
Yeah, I think it's 3.5 point.
Last I saw it was 2.5.
All right, let me pull up real quick while we kind of talk about what we think the predictions will be here. I think one of the things before even giving the predictions, this is not something we really mentioned yet. This is a really kind of a make or break game for the Patriots, and
Yep.
they need to win this game, and they need to look good in this game because there's only 10 games left in the year.
Yep.
Two of them are the Bills. So if you're kind of thinking about how the Patriots have looked so far, how everything's going, right now, I'm not willing to say they're going to win any of those two Bills games. So that only brings you down to 8 games that you have. And you only have 3 wins this year. So you would have to win 8 of those games to have an 11-win season, which I said
6.
11-6 at the beginning of the year. I'm still going to stick with that just because, but it's looking less and less likely that may happen based on numbers.
Yeah.
Odds are you're probably more looking at a 10-win team at most, unless they pull off something that's really unexpected here. So with those 10 games, you really have a very limited margin for error, and you have to win this game. Yeah.
Yep.
All of the next games coming up are pretty much must-win games.
Yeah.
So you
not must win in that if you lose, you're automatically out, but these are teams that you should win.
Yeah.
And since you should win, you have to win.
Yep, exactly. Because there's by how middling the AFC is, 9 wins is probably going to get you there. But there's going to be a lot of
last
teams
year it did too. Last year the Raiders went in at 9-8.
I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of teams at 9 wins. So you got to worry about the tiebreakers. The Jets is not only a conference game, but a divisional game too. So you need to have that head to head. Let's say you and the Jets tie it's first going to go head to head. So you need to beat your conference games. You need to beat your divisional games. So this is a really important game for the Patriots, a game they need to win. And especially you don't want to be 3-5 going into the rest of the year for this, especially when you still have 2 games against the Bills left. So what would your
Bengals and Raiders and
but some of those games don't look as hard as they did before. Raiders aren't looking that great, but they're going to turn it around. We know it. Bengals are going to turn around. We know it.
They already started to. Bengals are 4-3 now. They started 1-3.
Yeah, Cardinals are going to suck by the end. We always know that happens. Their coach should probably be fired after this year. But 2.5 is the spread. Over under is 40.5.
Yeah, so I'm actually a little surprised that it's that close, considering the Jets are 5-2, the Patriots are 3-4, and it's in New York. But I think since it is a make or break a game, Patriots are facing the Jets, who Bill hates. I think this is we're on to Cincinnati game, considering it's the game where you just bury the ball in the practice field, forget about that previous game, and then just go to work. And I think they're going to go to work. How they play this year doesn't back that up. But I think that my prediction is Patriots 38-13. Part of it is just a gut feeling with stats and evidence not backing it up, and just previous Patriots, which this might not be a previous Patriots team, but that's what I'm going with, and I hope I'm right.
All right, I'm going to go with Patriots here, 24-13. Just based on how the Jets have done defensively, how the Patriots have scored. I don't think it's going to be a heavily scoring game by them. I think Mac's still going to get his feet wet. I don't think he's going to be still 100%. His ankle may be 100% by then, but it's going to take time for him to get the rust off, get everything going right. So I think after this game, then he'll kind of have all the rust shaken off and we'll start doing well. But it's going to be a big factor on how Patricia calls plays, how Judge is in there, and are they going to get back to basics, or are they going to still have their head in the sand and try and just throw the ball downfield the whole game? So I'd like to think that they're going to have more of a mixed approach. So I'm going to say 24-13. I don't think Zach Wilson's going to do enough to win the game for him.
Yep, I agree.
All right. So that really wraps up this episode. Thanks everyone for joining, listening. Good to be back again this week after missing last week's episode. So look forward to talking to you guys next week. And then we'll heads up in a few weeks from now. We'll be having trying to get a guest on. If not, I may be doing this an episode solo coming up. So we'll see. But Hopefully you guys have subscribed, rate, and review. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter at Pat's 300 Level Pod. Look at us on YouTube, subscribe there as well. Add some comments if you like anything you disagree with, agree with, anything that you'd like to see change. We're always up for any feedback you guys have, and look forward to talking to you guys next time.